Hi everyone, Flaming Footy here and welcome back to a new YouTube video on the channel. And today guys, it is that time of year again. AFL 2023 is heating up, season 2023 is heating up. We're getting to the pointy end of the year, and in today's video I'm going to be going through the round 18 to 24 preview, the run home, going through every club's run home fixture, and yeah, let's just go ahead and hop right into things. Alright, so this video is going to be broken up into two parts. The fixture preview, all of round 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, and then a club-by-club run home. So the fixture preview is going to be quick. The club-by-club run home will be a little bit more in-depth. Now, of course, I'll be doing weekly round previews, a bit more in-depth of all these rounds. This is going to be a little skim over, but anyway, let's go ahead. Hop right into things. Round 18, Sydney Dogs, Thursday night. Doesn't get much bigger for the Dogs than this. Melbourne, Brisbane, Collingwood, Freo, Gold Coast Saints, Carlton, Port, Geelong, Essendon, Adelaide Giants, North Melbourne, Hawthorn, West Coast, Richmond. There are some pretty big games in this round, which are definitely going to be setting up top 8. Adelaide, GWS, Geelong, Essendon, Carlton, Port Adelaide, Gold Coast, St Kilda, Melbourne, Brisbane, Sydney, Western Bulldogs, all going to have some big ramifications. Round 19 starts off with the big Friday night clash between the Dons and the Dogs. Huge clash this will be, regardless of whether win, loss, whatever happens this week. Huge clash this will be. Richmond and Hawthorn. Richmond, they've got an easy draw coming on from here. This is probably one of the games which they should be able to win. Carlton, another really easy game for them. Brisbane and Geelong will be a big twilight game at the Gabba. Before then, probably one of the biggest games of the year. Second versus the first. This could decide who finishes first and second. Port Adelaide and Collingwood, Saturday night, Adelaide Oval. And then Fremantle and Sydney is probably another big game. Probably is a real last chance for these two clubs. GWS Gold Coast will still be just as big game on the Sunday. Melbourne and Adelaide, big game there as well. And then the Saints absolutely need to beat North Melbourne. Round 20, Collingwood Carlton, Friday night, a big rivalry, and the winner here will just be absolutely crucial. Dogs and Giants might not seem like a good game, but it still will have its ramifications, as will Geelong and Freo. Gold Coast and Brisbane, of course, that'll still be another one which will have its ramifications on the top 8. Essendon and Sydney is going to be huge for the Bombers year, and then the showdown. This could just be as critical as it gets for both these two clubs. Probably Adelaide will have a little bit more going into it, but Port Adelaide still need to try and keep up right up the top with Collingwood, and yeah, they'll definitely want to win the showdown. Hawthorn, St Kilda, huge for St Kilda's year as well. They need to try and get a couple of wins against these easier sides, even though they haven't been going too great as of late. Richmond and Melbourne is just as big, and then West Coast and North will have no effect at all. Now, the Dogs and the Tigers is the first game on the Friday night in round 21. Huge game that'll be. Essendon, West Coast, Essendon, this is their best chance, probably for some percentage, you'd assume. Adelaide, Gold Coast, pretty big still. Hawthorn, Collingwood probably won't be big. But Geelong and Port Adelaide will be at GMHBA. That'll be a huge clash. And then the Sydney Derby, GWS versus Sydney on the Saturday night as well. Huge clash there. North Melbourne probably won't do anything, but St Kilda and Carlton most certainly will. This could be one of the games which could potentially set up the top 8, especially, either way this one goes, it could just about be enough for the Saints to make the finals, and it could definitely be a surge for Carlton this game. And then Freo and Brisbane finishes it off in Perth. Round 22 now has Collingwood and Geelong on the Friday night. That'll be a big clash. Essendon, again, another really good percentage boosting opportunity against North Melbourne. Sydney and Gold Coast, you think they'll probably both be out of the race by the time this will be happening. Brisbane and Adelaide, again, Adelaide definitely cannot lose a lot of percentage in this game, and Brisbane, they'll just be looking to try and bank the points and as much percentage as they can. Carlton and Melbourne on the Saturday night will still be a huge game, and then, yeah, you probably think Freo will be out of it as well by the time of this derby, but again, those derbies are still pretty big. A real prime time one there. Hawthorn and Dogs at UTAS will probably still be big for the Western Bulldogs. Saints Tigers should be a absolute classic game. And then Port Adelaide and GWS will finish it off at the Adelaide Oval. And the Giants will probably need the win here. However, if they don't get the win, the best they'll be able to possibly do, if they can't get the win, will be not to lose too much of that variable percentage. Collingwood, Brisbane, round 23 Friday night. I don't think it'll get bigger than this. That is absolutely huge. Richmond, another really easy game against North. They need to bank the points and some percentage. Gold Coast and Carlton play off in what will be a big game at Heritage Bank Stadium before a game which could potentially shape the 8 as well. GWS and Essendon at Giants Stadium. That's going to be a huge clash. St Kilda and Geelong on the Saturday night. Another really big clash. And Adelaide and Sydney as well should be a good one. The Dogs should be able to get the percentage against West Coast. on the Sunday. Melbourne and Hawthorn is a huge game for Melbourne, and then Freo and Port Adelaide finishes it off round 24. We don't know what the fixture's looking like. Probably fixture might be out in a couple of weeks, I reckon, but I really couldn't have waited until then to film this video. We need to do it now. And well, we've got North Melbourne and Gold Coast, which should have no effect. Sydney and Melbourne, which might affect Melbourne's top 4. Again, though, Sydney probably will have no effect on them. Brisbane and St Kilda, it probably won't be a great game, but it'll be a big game, of course. Carlton and GWS might be a big game as well. It might be the ticket into the finals for one of these two clubs, potentially, depending on how their run home from there till now goes. Essendon and Collingwood, that'll be a big clash for sure. So will Geelong and the Western Bulldogs. Hawthorn and Freo, again, they'll probably both be out of it by this time. Port Adelaide and Richmond will be big, probably for Port Adelaide's top 2. And then West Coast and Adelaide could be the game which sees Adelaide get into finals. Now to the club-by-club run home. So for Adelaide, they've got the Giants at the Adelaide Oval, Melbourne at the MCG, Port Adelaide at the Adelaide Oval, Gold Coast at the Adelaide Oval, Brisbane at the Gabba, Sydney at the Adelaide Oval, and West Coast at the Adelaide Oval. Huge games here for Adelaide. They have to win probably all of their Adelaide Oval games and this one versus West Coast to make the finals. Oh, how Brisbane would love to be contending for a top 2 spot. Definitely knocking off the Demons on Friday night would be huge. Then they'll definitely have to beat the Cats and the Suns, the Dockers, the Crows. Collingwood is winnable and the Saints is also very winnable. There is a very bunch of winnable games here. Collingwood and Melbourne probably 50-50s. Aside from that, I can see them easily winning the rest of these games. Carlton and Port, huge game on the Saturday. That could just about be make or break for Carlton. Then they've got West Coast. Should be an easy win. Collingwood, St Kilda in a 50-50 game. Melbourne, Gold Coast and the Giants. Tough run home for Carlton, but they are showing signs of improvement. This run home will be huge and interesting to see whether they make the finals or not. Collingwood have a ton of primetime games coming up. Freo should be a decent win for them. Huge game versus Port Adelaide. Could be first. They could finish first or second after that game. That'll be huge. And then after that, they've got their good old rivals, Carlton. Then they've got Hawthorn, Geelong in a big game. And then Brisbane, and then Essendon. So, huge run home here for Collingwood. Not easy, but definitely, though, for a team of how good they are, yeah, Collingwood, watch out. Knocking off Adelaide definitely helped Essendon's case, but it's not going to be very easy for them. Probably their hardest games are against Geelong and then the Western Bulldogs. They get a break with Sydney, West Coast and North, all at Marvel Stadium. Before then they play the Giants in what will be a huge game at Giants Stadium, and then Collingwood to finish off the year in front of a packed out MCG crowd. Freo, who of course are still mathematically in the race, but they've got Collingwood and Sydney. Then they've got Geelong, Brisbane, West Coast, Port Adelaide and Hawthorn. Very tough run home here for Freo. Unlikely that they do make the finals because of the teams and degree of difficulty they have, especially considering they have first and second. But it'll be interesting to see how many wins they can bank in this last block. Geelong still have a ton of games remaining at GMHBA Stadium. They've got Essendon on the Saturday night. Then they've got Brisbane at the Gabba before then playing Freo and Port Adelaide, both at GMHBA Stadium. Then they play Collingwood, then they play St Kilda, and then they finish off the year with the Dogs in a round 24 huge clash at GMHBA. So they've still got plenty of GMHBA remaining games, but they've got some huge games to the Cats. Gold Coast is still mathematically in the hunt, but it'll be very tough and it could be season over on Saturday against St Kilda should they lose. That'll be a huge game. Then they've got the Giants at Manuka Oval, a venue where the Giants haven't won in a long time. But then they've got Brisbane at Heritage Bank Stadium, Adelaide at the Adelaide Oval and Sydney at the SCG. Very tough weeks there. And then it is Carlton at Heritage Bank Stadium ahead of round 24 North at Blunston. GWS do have a very tough run home, but they could definitely pull some surprise upsets in this block. They play Adelaide at the Adelaide Oval in a tough game. Before then, it's the Suns at Manuka Oval, the Dogs at Mars Stadium, Sydney at Giants Stadium, Port Adelaide at the Adelaide Oval, Essendon in what should be, again, huge clash at Giants Stadium, then another huge round 24 clash with Carlton at Marvel. So for Hawthorn, who won't make finals, they've still got a game against North Melbourne, a big game. Then they've got Richmond, St Kilda, Collingwood, Western Bulldogs, Melbourne, and Freo. Only one more game at UTAS for them for the year, but there are definitely a couple of winnable games, and Hawthorn are definitely a team which could definitely surprise a few and play spoiler for finals. So Melbourne's top 4 hopes will rely on this because a loss and they can be back with that chasing pack again, and fourth could be up for grabs. Brisbane on Friday night, the MCG is going to be huge. Then they play Adelaide at the MCG, Richmond at the MCG, North Melbourne at Blunston, Carlton at the MCG, Hawthorn at the MCG, and Sydney at the SCG. Not too hard here for Melbourne. They should be able to win most of these games, but again though, it'll be very interesting to see how they go and how many wins they pick up. Now for North, who won't make finals either, but again can still play spoiler. Hawthorn on the weekend. Then they've got St Kilda in a game which they'll definitely want to be upsetting in. Then they play West Coast, so they've got Hawthorn and West Coast still to come, North Melbourne, but that is in Perth. Then they play Melbourne at Blunston Arena, Essendon at Marvel, Richmond at the MCG, and then Gold Coast at Blunston Arena. So they are playing a couple of those mid-range sides, but then they're also playing some sides towards the top as well, North Melbourne. Port Adelaide want to finish top 2, and their run home is pretty interesting. Carlton at Marvel Stadium, Collingwood at the Adelaide Oval in what will be definitely a sold-out crowd. Then the showdown the next week, and then Geelong at GMHBA. So pretty tough couple of weeks for Port Adelaide. Then they've got the Giants at the Adelaide Oval, Freo in Perth, and then Richmond at the Adelaide Oval. This will be interesting for Port Adelaide. You'll probably think they'll win most of these games, but yeah, very interesting run home for them indeed. Richmond don't have a bad run home indeed. They've got West Coast in Perth, then Hawthorn at the MCG, then they've got Melbourne at the MCG before then the Dogs at Marvel and the Saints at Marvel. Then they've got North Melbourne in a game which they probably should win, then Port Adelaide in round 24. Definitely to make the finals for them, they'll need to try and win one of those Marvel games as a bare minimum, probably both of them, but yeah, this will be very interesting to see how the Tigers go in their run home because it is definitely a bit difficult. Couple of easy games, couple of tougher ones. St Kilda haven't been great as of late, and their spot in the finals could come down to this fixture for sure, and it will. They've got Gold Coast Heritage Bank Stadium, then they've got North Melbourne at Marvel, Hawthorn at Marvel, Carlton at Marvel, Richmond at Marvel, Geelong at Marvel, and then the Lions at the Gabba. Some huge games in there. They definitely can't lose to Gold Coast, North, Hawthorn and Carlton. They definitely won't be wanting to lose to those teams. But yeah, there's definitely the chance that they can win most of these games, or if it just goes the wrong way for them, they could lose most of them. But look, this huge run home here for St Kilda, absolutely massive run home. And yeah, their spot on the 8, it will be one of the more interesting ones and one of the biggest ones. And that is what that's the fixture that they're going to have to decide. Sydney are probably mathematically still in it, but they need everything to go their way. Starts with the Dogs on Thursday night, then Freo on the Saturday night in Perth. Then they've got Essendon at Marvel, GWS at Giants Stadium, Gold Coast at the SCG, Adelaide at the Adelaide Oval, and Melbourne at the SCG. Of course, considering they were grand finalists from last year, this is a very tough fixture indeed, and it's almost impossible to see them making it, especially with this fixture. It is very tough. West Coast won't make the finals either, but along with other teams, they can still play spoiler. They still do play some teams in contention. They play Richmond in Perth, then they've got Carlton at Marvel, then they've got North Melbourne in Perth, then they've got Essendon at Marvel, Freo in the Derby, the Dogs at Marvel, and Adelaide at Optus Stadium in Perth. Of course, very tough run home again, but West Coast, they can still play spoiler, and they still have a very winnable game, of course, against North Melbourne as well. But yeah, interesting to see how they go in this run home. And now we finish with the Western Bulldogs. They've got the Swans at the SCG on Thursday night. Then Essendon, a huge Friday night clash. Then they've got the Giants at Mars, the Tigers at Marvel, the Hawks at UTAS, West Coast at Marvel, and then Geelong at GMHBA. Again, very interesting run home. They've got some tough games, but also some very winnable ones in here as well to the Western Bulldogs. Alright, so an absolutely huge run home is coming up for all these clubs. There's absolutely massive games everywhere in these last couple of weeks. But thank you guys so much for watching. Feel free to let me know in the comment section who you think will make finals and what you guys think of your team's run home. But thank you guys so much for watching. Please do make sure to leave a like and subscribe and hit that notification bell. See you guys never miss another video on the channel. Thank you guys so much. Bye everyone. Flaming Footy out.